What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. You guys, Derek and Cody with you as always. And guys, is there a defensive lineman on this roster? And we might be wondering, is it their last year in Indianapolis? We're going to actually break that down. But before we hop into it, just want to say this episode is presented by Prize Picks. Be sure to visit the Prize Picks app today and use the code BTJ for a $100 deposit match when you sign up. Now, you're probably wondering who it is that I'm referring to here, ladies and gentlemen, and we're going to go ahead and hop into it. And we are talking about Dayo Odeyingbo, defensive lineman out of Vanderbilt, who was drafted in the 2021 draft along with teammate Kwity Paye. And Dayo Odeyingbo, who has not gotten a contract extension yet, is going into the final year of his deal here with Indianapolis. And Cody, I look at this and I do wonder about it because it really all depends on Dayo Odeyingbo's season here with the Indianapolis Colts because, that first year we talked about Dayo Odeyingbo, he only played really in half a season because he was not ready to go at the start of 2021 due to the injury that he was overcoming. And then in 2022, he finally got a chance to be a full-time starter and had his first full offseason. So it was really his first full rookie season. And then, he started to finally piece a few things together. And then in 2023, we saw him come into the scene a little bit more. Last year had 38 combined tackles, forced 8 sacks on the year. So, was one of the higher sack totals on the entire team regarding last year. But it's going to be interesting here, Cody, for Dayo Odeyingbo, whether or not he's going to remain in Indianapolis or not. I look at it and say, if Dayo Odeyingbo, Cody, let's just say for all intents and purposes, has more sacks than what he did this last year. So he finishes with 9, maybe even double-digit sacks potentially. I know he's more of a spot guy, so he's not a full-time starter, but he does come in obvious pass down situations. But say Dayo hits 10 sacks. Do you think there's any way that the Colts can actually retain Dayo Odeyingbo if he has a season like that?
Absolutely. I think they'd be foolish not to be honest with you, Derek, because Dayo's young. He's obviously got the athletic ability. And if he can continue on that upward trajectory, right? You talked about 2022, 5 sacks, 2023, 8 sacks. So if he gets double-digit sacks and he continues to show that he's getting better, especially like we've talked about it before with like the new defensive line coach, Charlie Partridge, if he can unlock a whole new level to Dayo Odeyingbo this year, I really do think like the Colts, that has to be their number one priority this next offseason because Dayo is so critical on pass downs, like you mentioned. And Derek, what have we talked about when it comes to the Colts and getting after the quarterback? Their inconsistency. They've been so inconsistent, and they've lacked those guys that can truly make a difference in terms of getting after the quarterback on a consistent basis, right? So Dayo's going to be at the end of next season. He's going to only be 25 years old. So he's right in the middle of his prime. And you're like, this kid still has so much potential. I mean, really, Derek, you talk about his rookie season, which was essentially a redshirt season for him. I mean, he played a little bit, but not really. And, so essentially he's going into year 3 of like having a full off season and essentially being that guy. So if he continues to go up, I think the Colts will have no choice because he's one of the younger guys and would be probably one of the youngest / best pass rushers on the team, depending what Latu does. I mean, that would be wise for the Indianapolis Colts to do, especially considering, you don't consider Kwity Paye at this point a guy that's going to get after the quarterback consistently. And the other guys you have on your roster are getting closer to 30. I mean, Samson Ebukam is right around that age. So is Tyquan Lewis. So, I mean, when you look at it, you're like, there's a lot of guys that are getting older, but Dayo is still that young guy in his mid-20s that has that upside of getting after the quarterback. So I think even if he had 8 sacks next year, I think the Colts would be foolish to let him walk because he is so integral to this defensive line. And you just think there's so much more Dayo can do. I really do believe he still has not unlocked his full potential as a pass rusher. And so I'm really curious to see. I mean, gosh, Derek, we saw the difference a coaching staff makes on, players. I mean, good grief. You talk about, I don't know if you saw Quentin Nelson on the one podcast, Barstool podcast he was on, but he talked about, what a difference the coaching staff made. What a difference he had with Tony Sperano Jr. and not just him, but the entire offensive line getting back to where they needed to get. Right. So again, I don't know how much, if it'll have that kind of a difference, but if it has any sort of difference, that's certainly a great thing, really, really good thing. And so I think if Dayo is on the roster and he continues to kind of show that upward trajectory of getting after the quarterback, I mean, we know he's got the physical tools, but if he can continue to grow as a pass rusher, I don't see a scenario where you don't. I almost feel like that has to be like your number one priority.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that you mentioned the coaching staff changes because we've been talking about that a lot over the offseason, but we really haven't mentioned that with Dayo Odeyingbo recently. We talked about, with the offensive line, and when Tony Sperano came in, we went from one of the worst offensive lines in football to automatically, again, one of the best in the NFL, even with some of the injuries that we've had to deal with through that entire season. Still were able to keep Gardner Minshew upright the majority of the time. Defensive line, we've been talking about Latu coming in and talking about, and even DeForest Buckner now getting a Charlie Partridge in there who can, maybe make some things different. And with Dayo Odeyingbo, I mean, he has gotten better every single season that he has been in the NFL. He has gotten better, and he's one of the few guys that he's gotten better every season, yet we still don't think he's as good as he could be. And he was also doing that with a defensive line coach that the Colts parted ways with because they didn't believe that he was developing them the right way and putting them in the right situations on the field at the right times. Now you bring in this other guy that's very well respected, very well knowledgeable, and very understanding of how the game goes. And you think if Dayo Odeyingbo is doing that with someone that wasn't doing his job the way the Colts wanted, could only imagine if Charlie Partridge is the answer, how much higher the potential could be for Dayo Odeyingbo. And I'm certainly not going to disagree with you in any way, shape, or form on whether or not the Colts should try to keep Dayo Odeyingbo around. No question, you want to keep a guy like Dayo Odeyingbo around. My only reason for asking the question is because my issue is, I'm sure Dayo Odeyingbo does not want to be only a role player for the remainder of his NFL career. I'm sure he wants to try to get a starting job somewhere. And my issue is if he gets 9+ sacks this next year and improves on his overall consistency and getting pressure on the quarterback, somebody's going to look at that and say, maybe that's somebody, and especially we know what Dayo is, 6'6", 280. The guy's a behemoth. So, and a guy that can play inside and outside because of his athleticism and because of his size. So other teams see it the same way the Colts do. But my issue is if he becomes too good, I do wonder, what do the Indianapolis Colts decide to do, Cody? Because they can't guarantee him a starting role right now. Even after this season, they can't guarantee him a starting role anywhere because you got Grover Stewart locked down with a contract. You have DeForest Buckner signed in with a contract. Samson Ebukam is going to have at least one more year left on his deal. And Latu will be coming in. You drafted him for this exact reason. If you didn't have faith in Dayo or Quiddy to be the full-term answer. So that's why you brought Latu in. So he's already thinking, I'm going to have to at least wait one more year before I can become an actual starter on this team. And if he does really good, Cody, the number is gonna rise. You know how the defensive end market has become recently, and it's gonna be a lot. So, I mean, we saw the Colts just decide to keep Kwity Paye on his 5th-year option for $13 million, and he was the quote unquote worst consistent pass rusher that we had, according to PFF standards. So take that as you wish. But I look at it and say 2025, there's a lot of free agents for the Indianapolis Colts that there needs to be some priority. You know, you talk about Ryan Kelly, you talk about Julian Blackman, you talk about Will Fries as a potential one. And then Dayo Odeyingbo comes in there, and another one in EJ Speed, who I know he's getting older, but I mean, EJ Speed, you have to think about that. I mean, he's been really, really good for you. So, I mean, after even with all of these free agent options that you still have to consider re-signing, and the fact that the Colts won't have a ton of cap next year, even if it rises. I mean, we may not have one of the top overall cap spaces, especially if we maybe even looking to try to bring in some more players this offseason as well. Do you still believe that the Colts will end up finding a way to convince Dayo to stick around long term? As we said, guys, today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. Now, what is Prize Picks? Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Instead of battling against thousands of other players across platforms, you're basically picking 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're choosing more or less on those stat projections to be able to watch those winnings roll in. It's very easy. Do you guys want to play along at some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and UFC fighter Sugar Sean O'Malley? Well, if you guys sign up today, you can find the community plays under the promos tab of the app to view the entries of some of the biggest names on the platform and be a part of that as well. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 just like that with NBA, NHL, and college basketball entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Like a lot of other things, guys, they also offer injury insurance, so your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So if someone exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player projection won't count against you, and the rest of your entry stays live. So it's great bounce back for that one. What I love about the app as well, guys, is it's not just sports like NBA, NHL, football, and tennis, and baseball, and all these other things, but there's also a lot of others that go into it as well. If you like to place entries on video game situations like Call of Duty, CS2, Apex, if that's something that appeals to you, there's a wide variety of sports and video games and everything else that you can place entries on. And I love how expansive it is. Even just looking at the NBA, there's entries you can make with turnovers, with points. You can do combo deals, dunks, field goals attempted, all of these different things. So there's just so many different ways to make money off of these entries. Be sure to download the app today and use code BTJ for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app today and use code BTJ for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, it's sponsored by Prize Picks. Pick more, pick less. It's that easy.
I think they do because, I mean, Derek, you've been searching for a long-term piece at edge rush forever. Like, it's been so long. So why would you let a guy in the prime years of his career out the building, right? If there's anything I believe that Chris Ballard will do, I think he will pay for defensive line. Like, I think he is so fundamentally, like, aligned with, like, defensive line matters that much, and getting after the quarterback and doing those things matter that much, that I don't see Chris Ballard allowing that to walk out the building. I don't care if it costs you a little bit more. I mean, Derek, look what he was going to offer Danielle Hunter, right? So, like, he clearly sees that, like, he's willing to spend, say that worked out, man. Like, how much money are you invested in your defensive line at that point? I mean, that's crazy. But so Ballard, I don't believe will allow that to happen, especially a guy in the prime years of his career. If he does kind of break out even further into this season, I just think that is so important to what the Colts do and their kind of fundamental roster building philosophy that I don't like. If he does cost a lot, I think the Colts will do everything in their power to bring him back, right? And I do believe that like Dayo will be a Colt long term because I just don't see the Colts letting that kind of talent walk outside the building, especially with how much you have struggled in years past to consistently get after the quarterback. If you have a young guy waiting in the wings, I mean, him and Latu could be the long-term solutions there at the end positions, Derek. So it'd be hard for me to allow that and see Chris Ballard to allow that to walk, regardless if it costs you a little bit of money. It's like you'd rather, and I know Ballard obviously is a firm believer in, you'd rather, keep a lot of your own guys and guys that who have been in your building, been in your system. If they're good players, you'd rather keep them first, right? That's how I believe. And so if Dayo's that guy, like I don't see a scenario where Indy lets him walk out the building, or even like, if they want to keep a guy like that, they'll keep him. They'll make sure it does happen. And who knows? Maybe we do see them offer him an extension, earlier than maybe we're expecting, or maybe they let it play out and everything like that. But I just wonder if Chris Ballard has a little bit of scar tissue from the Nico Autry situation. You remember that when they allowed him to walk for like a couple million difference, and he signed with the rival Tennessee Titans. And every single year you played him, he completely disrupted your defense, your offensive line. So I just don't think Chris Ballard is going to let that type of talent outside the building again. I think he's learned from that. And I think Dayo, if he continues to progress, he's going to be worth every penny. Because, I mean, Derek, if you're going to pay for anything, you'd rather pay for premium positions. And that would certainly fit the bill with a guy that can get after the quarterback consistently.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly not mind if, I think my all-time favorite outcome of this would be if we see Dayo Odeyingbo get 9 or 10 sacks next year, and then the Colts can get him on a friendly deal, maybe like a solid 2-year, 3-year deal or something, where we can lock him in still for those prime years, but nothing too severely long, and something that's friendly in the first year of the contract, which I'm sure Chris Ballard could work with that. And then after the next year, or even with the if you see Dayo ascend, you could put him above Samson Ebukam in that starting edge spot, especially with how we know Dayo Odeyingbo is better against the run because of his size. So that would be great, is if him and Latu ended up being your starting edge guys. But that'll be something interesting to talk about. Again, guys, there's a lot to go into Dayo Odeyingbo's contract, and a lot of it is just unknown. There's just not a lot of understanding. It really is going to depend on how does Dayo Odeyingbo perform this year. That's going to determine a lot on whether or not he stays with the team, and if he stays with the team or whether he doesn't, how much money is he actually going to get paid? Because like we said, folks, the market keeps going up for defensive linemen. Defensive linemen are becoming a hot commodity in today's world. If you can get a guy that can consistently get 10 sacks a season, they're going to be worth some money. So let us know in the comments, guys. What do you believe? Do you believe this will be Dayo's last year in Indianapolis? Or do you think that this is just going to be another year where Indianapolis is going to figure out another way to keep one of their other guys around? But that'll do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for all the support. And as always, go Colts.